Gather around cause it's story time. Let's imagine they use our mind cause it's story time, story time. It's story time, story time. Let's use our imagination. Thinking and then create it. It's story time, story time. It's story time, story time. Let's explore with imagination. Think it, exaggerate it. It's story time, cause it's story time, story time.
Unicorns Have Bad Manners, written by Rachel Hartman, illustrated by Wendy Tan Su Wei, read by Jamel. Nigel loved tea parties, but he is very fussy about etiquette, even for a dinosaur. And you know how dinosaurs can be. Nigel's has searched and searched for someone with manners as perfect as his own, but he has always been disappointed. He dined with a dragon who wouldn't say please and set the whole table on fire when she sneezed. Achoo! He once saw a llama pour tea on his bread, then balanced a teacup on top of his head. Last month he tried serving an octopus lunch, but they juggled their apples and gargled their punch. But today will be different. Today's Nigel's guest is a unicorn. Nigel knows unicorns' manners will be sublime. Just as Nigel placed the last spoon on the table, Periwinkle, his soon-to-be best unicorn friend, arrives. Nigel puts his napkin on his lap with a flourish. Periwinkle doesn't. Would you care for something to sip? Nigel asks. Perhaps would I? Periwinkle says, and she grabs the soup ladle before Nigel can say a spot of tea. But Periwinkle doesn't sip her soup. She sloshes and snorkels and blows piles of bubbles. I thought you might want some tea, Nigel says weakly. Oh, Periwinkle says, don't mind if I do. She reaches across the table and stabs a stack of cookies and dunks them straight into the teapot. Munch, munch, munch. It's nice to meet new people, isn't it? Periwinkle says, twirling her fork. I'm so glad you invited me. Nigel is not glad. Nigel has to take a deep breath and eat a soothing cucumber sandwich. That's when Periwinkle says, oh, lilacs, and eats the flowers right out of the vase. What are you doing? Nigel asks. Eating, Periwinkle says. Lilacs aren't food? Then why are they on the table? She asks. They are a tasteful centerpiece. You ate the centerpiece. You drank the soup. You dipped your cookies in a teapot. You didn't even put your napkin on your lap. Nigel buries his face in his hands. I thought a unicorn would be polite and refined. I thought we'll nibble on cucumber sandwiches and sip tea with our pinkies out. But I can't stick my pinky out, Periwinkle says. I have hooves, and everybody dips their cookies in their tea. They very much do not, Nigel says. Then they should, Periwinkle says. It's delicious. Anyway, I think it's pretty rude to shout about your guest's manners, Periwinkle says more calmly. I didn't say anything when you ate your sandwich before your dessert. Wait, you're supposed to eat your dessert last. My great-grandma Gardena would not approve of that, Periwinkle says primly. Imagine it would be like eating cookies without a fork or putting soup in a bowl. Why wouldn't you put soup in a bowl? Nigel asks. Because, Periwinkle says, it's just bad manners. But don't you think it's rude to eat straight from the pot? I did wonder why I only had one ladle, Periwinkle says thoughtfully. What about reaching across the table? Nigel asks. But if you don't, Periwinkle says, someone has to hand you everything. Slurping your soup cools it down faster. Putting your elbows on the table? Now, I know you're making these things up, Periwinkle says. Why wouldn't you put your elbows on the table? Because it's just bad manners. Nigel tries putting his elbows on the table. It really is a bit of a silly rule. I never use the fork when I eat cookies, he says. Well, in that case, Periwinkle says, and she takes a cookie with one dainty hoof. Nigel nibbles on a lilac blossom. Periwinkle tries to eat her soup with a spoon. Lick. The cookies really are delicious when Nigel dips them in his tea. Munch, munch, munch. Maybe bad manners aren't so bad after all. But Nigel still saves his dessert for last. Unicorns have bad manners. The end. Thank you for reading with me.
Gather around cause it's story time. Let's imagine they use our mind. Cause it's story time, story time. It's story time, story time. Let's use our imagination. Think it and then create it. It's story time, story time. It's story time, story time. Let's explore with imagination. Think it, exaggerate it. It's story time, cause it's story time, story time.